frame. How is everybody doing this evening? So good to be here again on Sunday at Mike's, the live stream we do every Sunday night, 11 p.m. Central European Time. Good to be here, guys. Good to be here, Scott. Thank you so much for being here always. My moderator, Scott. Maddie Two Hats is also a moderator on this channel. I want to thank them up front for doing so. Um, yeah, Scott, I was looking at that Goodwood Festival of Speed, 10 hours of video of that. I don't remember anything like that being around when I lived in London between, was it 2006, 2009, about 3 years? I don't think they had that. That must be something new. But it looked interesting. I kind of like that kind of stuff. Actually, I don't know if you were being facetious or not, but I actually liked it. So I put the link in here, guys, in the chat if you're interested. I always start out this live stream by saying thank you for spending a little bit of your time with me. Time is a valuable thing. And of course, sharing your time, taking a minute to listen to this live stream every Sunday and every Wednesday night is always appreciated. And whether you guys watch this in the rerun or if you're watching this live right now, always want to hear from you down in the comments. So make sure you do that for me. I appreciate it so much. Ben, hey, how you doing? Cheers to you, sir. Good to have you here. Yeah, guys. In an odd way, I did that last live stream tongue in cheek. Um, but in an odd way, it was actually a very good live stream. A lot of good folks stopped by to say hello. It was a really good one. Mike, hey, how you doing? And so I said, well, if I'm doing whatever the heck I want, I'll make Sunday nights the same as well, and then go into in Japan. I should start out by saying, in the summertime, they have a tradition of telling scary stories and watching scary movies. The idea, of course, being behind it is that scary movies and scary, stories and things of that nature give you the chills and cool you down. And so, honestly speaking, I like watching scary movies in the summertime. Uh, I got that living 18 years in Japan, and I kind of developed it. All the scary movies always come out in the summertime in Japan, interestingly enough. I noticed in the West they usually come out in the fall and the winter, but in Japan they come out in the summertime. And I thought, tonight, it's hot in most places. We're all suffering from the heat a little bit. So I thought we would tell some scary music industry stories in order to cool us down a little bit for tonight's discussion. I generally talk about guitars and pedals and recording and all that kind of stuff. But tonight I thought that, and also, if I've been reading from the book Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon by Dave McGowan, excerpts from that book, and I've been talking about, at the end of the live streams, I've been talking about the music industry and some of its really murky past, going back 50, 60, 70 years. And tonight I want to do a kind of an extended version of that, to tell you the truth. I'm going to tie that book in. We will get to that book here, but we're actually going to tie in the live stream topic, and then we're going to read an excerpt from that book so that when you read that excerpt after tonight's live stream, after the discussion we have, it'll really hit home to you a couple of points. So hang in there, guys. I am so glad to have you here. Let me catch up in the live stream. Benny R3M. Hey, hi, how you doing? Good to have you here. Oodles Garden. Hey, hi, how you doing? Annie, do you hear what happens if you have any mental problems? Am I in a relationship? Do I hear what happens if I have any mental problems and I am in a relationship? Yeah, I don't quite get that one, Annie. Is it a relationship, Padme, Annie? you know, you really should watch that one. Mike Mars, just kidding there. Scott, hot as hell here. Yeah, yeah, it's hot everywhere. Oddly enough, here in Amsterdam, we got a few blazing days where it cooked my cucumbers out. My cucumber plants couldn't take it. Toasted my berry plants, my blackberry plants. Fortunately, I put them in the shade in time, but they're a little crispy. And my grapevines, and it was just too hot. It was just way too hot. Japan Rock and Scary Eagle Godzilla. Omar, cool, yeah. Yeah, that's a true tradition there. You know, it's kind of funny. A friend of mine, she told me a story about how when she was a little girl, she went to go see an movie with her mom, and in the summertime, because of course the movie theaters were air conditioned. It's really good. And trust me, I spent a summer in the '90s in going to movies. In some cases, when I should have been working. I think I went to go see the very last Star Trek movie, Insurrection or whatever it was, in an air-conned Japanese movie theater because it was just too darn hot outside, and I couldn't work. But she went to this movie theater with her mom, and they don't have ratings on their preview. So they'll show previews for everything. And the first preview they put up in front of a whole auditorium full of kids was the preview for an upcoming movie called The Evil Dead. I kid you not. She said that she couldn't sleep for a week after seeing that preview. She was only like, what year was that? So she was only like 6 or 7 years old, man. Imagine traumatizing a whole audience full of kids, showing them a preview for The Evil Dead. One of my favorite movies, by the way. But yeah, I thought I would tie a couple of these things together. Scott says, Mike, what do you think about guys like Dr. Demento and Wolfman Jack? All right, Scott. I'm going to give you Dr. Demento because I grew up listening to Dr. Demento. Wolfman Jack is a little, although by the 70s, I know who Wolfman Jack is, obviously, because he used to host the rock show. What was that? Don Felder's rock show or whatever that was. Oh God, I'm old. Okay, I take it back. I do know both of those references, and they are relevant to my age. that's that's really sad. But what do I think about Doctor Demento was pretty cool. I loved his show. It came on oh, what was that station? It wasn't K Rock. It came on Sunday, but anyway, it came on Sunday evenings. And his closing song was this song called "Goodbye Cherry Lip," "Cheerio Cherry Lips Cheerio." And I used to love that ending song because it was an old British, "Cheerio Cherry Lips Cheerio." I used to love that, and of course, that was the first time that I ever heard of Weird Al Yankovic because his stuff made it on there, and a lot of stuff, And Wolfman Jack, if you grew up in L.A. in the 70s or 60s or 70s, then Wolfman Jack was part of your life. Midnight Special. Thank you, Ben. That's right. Don Krishna's rock concert hosted by Wolfman. Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, both Midnight Special, Don Krishna rock, both of those. I've seen Wolfman Jack. But not just that. If you look at the movie Hollywood Nights, which was filmed in 1980, um, with a great title track. I love that song, Hollywood Nights. Wolfman Jack is the DJ in that movie, so even by 1980, he was still relevant, So, by the way, that's the debut movie of Michelle Pfeiffer. So, if you want to check out Michelle Pfeiffer when she was pretty hot, that's the movie to see. But yeah, and that was 1980, so yeah, I'm an old guy. So, When there's money on the line, the artist is a product is the title of tonight's discussion. But don't worry, I didn't make it all doom and gloom. We'll talk about some of the darker stories from the past, but more importantly, the thing that I want to stress tonight is how artists today, even fans, can protect themselves and support real independence, real independent artists. So let's get comfy. I hear my cat meowing here. Hold on. Come on. Okay. I said that she can always come in. I'm doing a live stream. She's the unofficial studio cat, so I'll let that one go. Um, so I'm going to tell you, I'm going to start out with something that I was talking about the Beach Boys recently because we lost, really seriously, probably one of the greatest composers of the 20th century, Brian Wilson. And I keep going back to the Beach Boys because since Brian Wilson has passed away, I've been listening to a lot of it. I'm back in recording mode again, actually, guys. Fresh tape, as Prince used to say when he sat down to record a new song. I've moved on to fresh tape. I've moved on to a blues song called Under Your Skin. And I started recording the basic tracks this weekend. And it's a weird thing, but when I'm in recording mode, if a song or something comes to my mind, and they may have, and very rarely are they in the genre of what I'm trying to write, but there may be elements of them that I'll listen to in order to even draw inspiration even from the Beach Boys when I'm writing a blues song, believe it or not. Because sometimes it's about the arrangements and things like that. But I've been listening to a lot of the Beach Boys recently, a great deal, and so they've been on my mind. And I want to start out by saying that the '60s were pretty crazy. And Frederick Rogers in the house. Hey, how you doing? Welcome, Frederick. Welcome, welcome. Good to see you. The '60s were a crazy time that a lot of stuff was being developed that carries forward today in the entertainment industry. I think that by now, at this late stage in the game, if I can paraphrase Frank Zappa, when he said, someday they're going to raise up the props and you're going to see the brick wall that lays behind them. In other words, one of these days, cold reality things are going to hit you. Now, um, the carrot and stick of being a pop star, a rock star, a rap star, maybe even, I hope, I doubt it, but I hope, are starting to fade. They're starting to be shown as pursuits that maybe all that glitters is not gold, as they say. And I'd like to start there tonight about where this money, this fame, this connection network that could build you up and just as fast tear you down got started. And as you know, I've been talking about the Laurel Canyon scene in the 1960s, but there are other scenes as well that I want to discuss. Not just, and I'll go through time here. I'll hit in the '70s, the '80s, and the '90s, a few things to draw a more general point. And then, as I said, we're going to read a chapter in the book, the next excerpt I'd like to share with you to kind of bring all these things together. So here we are. Mike says, buy some merch or music direct from the artist after the show is a great way to support. Yeah, going to the show in itself is a great way to support. I honestly, truly, do have thoughts of putting on one live show, doing one live show because the expense of traveling around, I think Mary Splendor learned a lesson about that and she shared it with everybody that may not be the way to go. What I think about doing is doing one live show in a good venue and filming it and then putting that out. maybe doing some additional stuff to it, adding to it, and putting that out. And I think that that's a great way of supporting an artist as well, supporting their artistic endeavors. So there's that. Um, People really nowadays should know that all that glitters is not gold. We should be very aware of the star making machinery behind the popular song that Joni Mitchell wrote about, and how it is unquestionably something that is very hard to walk away from whole in a lot of different ways. Whole can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but let's go down the road a little bit here. Matty Two Hats, welcome, sir. How you doing? I gave you a shout at the beginning of the show, sir. I'm glad you showed up. Do you think that bands like the Bee Gees could have existed without the Beach Boys paving the way? Well, the Bee Gees were I know this, musically, yes, I do think that the Beach Boys paved the way for groups like, and also, of course, the Beatles as well. But in their own way, the Bee Gees really they had a couple of different turns with their career from where they started into their peak when they hit disco, the biggest, one of the biggest selling albums of all time before Michael Jackson came around. And I have to be honest with you, I think that they were superior to some of those groups in some ways because of that. They were able to change their music style. And that's always something that is impressive. Like Miles Davis changed music styles in jazz 3 or 4 times himself. He changed the way that it was written, how it was performed, and things of that nature. So I think the Bee Gees it was good that that happened. All right. Excuse me, guys. Um, Managers, labels, and the people who's supposed to protect you, lawyers, um, sometimes they're the ones that are pushing you forward because it really keeps the machine rolling. And actually, not sometimes, most of the time. Let me get this cough out, guys. Swallowed wrong there. Um, Look at Elvis Presley and his manager, Colonel Tom Parker. And basically, Parker just treated Elvis like a cash cow. As many, fancy cars and airplanes and Gracelands as Elvis had, Parker was making much more. I've told you about Jimi Hendrix manager, a guy who, much like the Laurel Canyon crew, had very strong ties to government operations. And so Elvis, and this is reaching back from his time in his beginnings in the 50s until his isolation days in Vegas, pumped full of pills just so he could stay functional. And when he broke down, you know, nobody stopped the show. They kept him out there, kept him going, and eventually he went out the way he went out. Who else high as F right now? I'm kidding. Hey, Michelle, how you doing? With tonight's topic, I keep thinking about the movie This Is Spinal Tap. Yeah, yeah. I think that Spinal Tap's that movie is one of the finest rock movies of all time for a lot of reasons. It was a parody, but there was a lot of truth in it. Yeah, you know. Um, Britney Spears for years, she was in a conservatorship. which is incredible to me that she had no control over her family, over her funds, her finances, really over her career. And it took a massive movement, Free Britney, in order to get the world to take a closer look at maybe what was going on there. And that she was a living cash cow for them. And we can go overseas to K-pop. And I just heard a story recently, just within the last few days, a tragic story about K-pop. I thought rap was a dangerous musical genre to endeavor to get into. Apparently, K-pop is worse, and we all know how that goes. Those kids, seriously, if you want a chance in that, you're talking about North Korean level kind of training, like starting from the time you're 5. And it's just no personal freedom in that kind of contract too. When you're working in a J-pop or a K-pop band, you're not allowed to date. Although we all know from what happened with the Johnny's scandal, if you're not familiar, there was a guy named Johnny, a Japanese guy, who after the war, Second World War, he started an entertainment company. And eventually, through the 60s into the 70s and 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, up until he died, it was the most influential production company in Japan. And they had tie-ins to every Japanese TV company, movies, the works. And as it turns out, in most of the cases with a lot of the boys groups, it was always boys groups, it was never girls groups. I should give you a little bit of hint and help. Like, why is Johnny's all boys groups? Because he was playing hide the pickle with these boys. And, quite frankly, and he got away with it. Everybody knew it. Everybody knew it was, everybody knew it. And it took a British investigation, the BBC, to really look into it, of course, after he was dead, in order to expose the abuses that went on. And it's no different in the case of J-pop when it comes to the girls. They're not allowed to date, but, they got to play hide the pickle with the manager and the booking agents and, the TV executives and things like that. So, as and that's on top of course, the fact that you had to, start from the time you were 5 years old, in order to get that one spot in that group. And you still got to play hide the pickle, whether you're boy or girl, don't matter. It's just terrible. I'm laughing about it. It says in the book that these things would be so heinous that they're shameful to even speak of. But since we're going down this rabbit hole tonight, it would really behoove me to at least be fair and touch upon the fact that this is not just a Western phenomenon, that it is going on in full gear over in the Far East. Yon Somali is so good, she must be industry manufacturing at its finest. Yeah, they still get away with it. We tolerate way too much of this stuff. Yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot of this is not a political statement. This is just, this is moved beyond politics. But you guys can see with, that Epstein stuff that they're not even trying to fool you guys anymore. They're straight up telling you, nothing to see here, move along, sir. It's like, it really is that scene, I know, pay a dollar, Mike, every time I mention Star Wars and Star Wars, where Bail Organa is trying to get into the Jedi temple, but the stormtrooper is like, nothing to see here, sir, move along. Well, that's the kind of situation we're in right now. We're forced, they're not investigating Prince Andrew anymore. That investigation has been dropped as a result, and you and I both know that that dude was no bueno. So yeah, it's the same thing in the music industry. Same thing, same thing. So we hear tragic stories of young idols overworked, locked into insane contracts, no personal freedom, some even unfortunately dying by their own hand. When you see this as product, you have to start questioning yourself, is this product that I want to support too? We can support our local artists, but some of this pop stuff really maybe shouldn't be supported as great as it is, because the mental health of these people, east or west, really does come into question, especially when you look at Britney Spears, for example. You know, and I think the story on that book is still open. We'll see. So the system or the people is really what it comes down to. Is this a giant conspiracy, or this is just how the business works? It's just business as usual. Honestly, it's a little bit of both. Um, there is no smoke filled back room where five evil guys control everything. It's actually 300, but we won't get in. And actually, of that 300, you can break that down into seven. But anyway, there's no five guys in a smoke filled room, evil guys controlling everything, tongue in cheek. But the system is designed to put profit before people, and if you're not careful, you can be deceived into becoming the product. And I think this is a cautionary tale tonight, also, as well. A lot of points I'm trying to make, because I don't think you see your. I hated it. Oh, I hated it. When you had the big push on YouTube is this is your product, and you need to be marketing your product, and you need to do all of this, that, and the other. And the truth of the matter is, you know my music is not product. It is something that I think has a value that the market will determine what that value is, but its value is not intrinsic in its monetary worth, but in the worth of it as its artistic value in totality. So honestly speaking, that kind of irked me a little bit, because then when your music becomes a product, which was the way I always mentally took that pathway, then you become the product. And so that's why we see artists fighting for their masters, for example. Prince, famously, Taylor Smith had to completely re record her entire catalog in order to own the new masters on it. So now you got two masters of each song in her catalog. And I don't care what she does, I don't care how she does it, it is not possible for her to re record those songs and for them to have the same sonic qualities of the originals. Because even the same studio, different environment, different days, different things. All those things, or even if it wasn't recorded in the same studio, different studios, you're not going to be able to catch that magic of that time when that song was recorded. And that's the truth of it. Now, it could be actually a better recording. That could happen as well. But, you're not going to do it, It's just not going to happen. But I admired her for trying. It was something that Prince didn't think of. I think if he had thought of it, he would have definitely done the same thing. And I think if anybody could have pulled something like that off, it would have been Prince. And if you don't know what you're signing, you're the easiest person to exploit. And so we look at a lot of these deals that were made in the Laurel Canyon time, touching back on that quickly, that were the precursors for a lot of the deals that came subsequently after that. Now, there are artists who beat the system, and I'll put a question mark next to that on this first one. Mike says, by 27 years old, the idol is spent and meant to be discarded. Yeah, you have the famous 27 Club. You've got Hendrix, Joplin, Cobain, supposedly Morrison. You know, all these, that British singer girl. They were all 27 years old when they passed away. So that's a famous thing. Now, you know, without getting into it too deeply, I would look at 27 and I would look at the gamma tree of that. In other words, the numerical value of 2 and 7 is 9. And then look at what is 9 and then ask yourself a certain amount of questions regarding that. I leave that to you if you so wish to go down that path. It'll be very illuminating, I guess would be the term that would be appropriate. But, Prince wrote Slave on his face to protest how the record label owned him. And he eventually got control back of his masters and then they killed him. Or he killed himself. Either way, he's not with us today. Taylor Swift got blocked from owning her own masters. So what did she do? As I mentioned, she re-recorded her entire catalog, and her fans supported her so hard that the re-recordings outsold the originals. Now, I never said they weren't going to be profitable. I'm just saying from an artistic standpoint that some of those recordings, they're not going to sound the same. Mean, the first recording is not going to sound identical to the re-recording of Mean, for example, which is I know I shouldn't say this, to my audience, risking the loss of such audience. But the song "Mean" by Taylor Swift, I always thought was an excellent country song. I admire the production on that song, the playing, and her vocal. But I doubt that recording that I'm familiar with. I haven't heard the re-recording, but I bet you they don't sound the same. They don't. There's no way. It's no way. So a lot of old groups that had a dedicated fan base are saying, "Hey, you know, we got this fan base through our blood, sweat, and tears, like Radiohead, and they dropped in Rainbows as a pay what you want download, cutting out the label entirely." Um, De La Soul did the same thing. I do believe they did a pay as what you want for their album. Of course, you can use Bandcamp, Patreon, direct to fan merch, all to keep personal control. So here is the way that an artist can beat the system by taking control. By taking control. Sabrina Carpenter is the new one. Came up through the Disney farm and signed a contract at 12. Yeah. And by the way, where is our good friend Miley Cyrus? Right? You know, Billy Cyrus, speaking of the Cyrus clan, I want you guys to really think about Billy Cyrus, and he is the one who is credited with bringing forward that gay black rapper. I want you to really think about that one for a second. Put a book, I'll throw that one out there as well, and ask yourself a couple of questions. You know, like what's up with that? And then his daughter Miley. I mean, I've seen pictures of Miley with her pants, and I wasn't looking for it too. These were pictures in photo spread magazines with her with her pants down around her ankles, pissing behind a car, and she wasn't. And they weren't exactly blurring it either. So yeah, the system. Sabrina Carpenter, she's gonna be pissing out behind a car herself one of these days, or worse, or worse. But you can overcome that. You don't have to be part of that system. The tools are better than ever for you to utilize them. How long those tools will be available, we'll see. But they are still available. And the trick is knowing how to use them. You know, I've dealt with contracts. I've dealt with shady promises on a personal level. The lure of, do this for us and we'll do, and it'll make you famous, or we'll do this deal for you later. I've been through all those. I've been in the room like the proverbial fly in the wall when things were being discussed that, quite frankly, if anybody really knew what these artists were really into, they wouldn't be artists anymore, which I guess gets back to the whole Epstein thing in a way. But I digress. Um, it always comes with a catch. The minute you sign away your publishing, your masters, or your rights, you're at the mercy of whoever controls the paperwork. And if you burn out as an artist, if you say, hey, I don't want to tour anymore, I don't want to do this, then you're probably in a hole financially. And they probably, if you signed a 360 deal, you can't even come out with a YouTube channel because they own that as well. you know. So read everything, own everything, and build a community of fans who care about you and what you do, not just the product that you make. You know, maybe they can understand that it's a creative process and appreciate that. Because we're moving into an AI age where the creative process is even that. I thought, okay, AI is just going to completely destroy the creative process because much like I'm looking at having some things made in Japan, but because all that manufacturing left over to China, you can't find anybody in Japan to make the famous made in Japan stuff anymore. All that labor has died out, it's gone. And, um, honestly, with the music industry the way it is right now with AI, it's going to be the same. Well, it is. It is the same thing. What fascinated me is listening to Will I Am talking about how he's never seen any YouTube money. It's all going to the label. Yes. So that's why for a lot of these artists, again, you sign that kind of deal, then they got everything that you create, everything that you do, every T-shirt. If you make a paperclip, they're in on it. It's the old term in your pocket. They are in your pocket for life. Hey, Will, how you doing? Good to see you. Red's in the house. Good to see you. Yeah, Red, we're just talking about the music industry and just, avoid it. You know, if I had known that time that I went out with that girl, and she said, "Oh, I'm going to this book reading tonight. A bunch of people. Why don't you come over and sit down with us and join in with us?" She was pretty hot. She smelled like cherry chapstick, actually, just like the song, or was it no cherry? She smelled. She had that L.A. girl smell to her, and so I went, and it ended up being a coven, and they were reading from the book of Do As I Will. They were reading from Crawley's book, and and the guy who was the coven master was a lawyer. And I sat in this room with this coven of witches and men and women and went through this process, and it was very enlightening because when I looked through that room, I saw people that I had seen on TV. I'm sure some of them were in business, and the guy who was running the coven was very interested in me. He's like, "What are you into? What do you do?" In other words, we got a position for you. you know. So I can tell you from personal experience that that kind of stuff really happens because I've experienced it myself. I've been there, you know. The reason I walked away from it, not because of at that time, certainly, I'm not even gonna lie to you, at that time, any kind of religious or ethical, reasons. If I thought, that this girl wasn't just stringing me along, maybe I would show back up for another night, who knows? And that had been really terrible for me. Good thing I just kind of bailed from it. But, you know, I just honestly have to say that the music industry is based on a foundation of stuff like that. And if you can, and that's my personal insight on it, that's, you can take that to the bank. I've seen it. I told you, a lot of stories I could tell. Some of them I won't because, honestly, they're not my stories to tell. But the ones that I do can give you kind of an idea of what those are like. And just being independent and having my own manager with Reggie while he was my manager, and then Hirano-san when I was in Japan, and then eventually becoming my own manager, has kept me away from a lot of the dirt. Um, as if dating isn't hard enough. Yeah, when you're dating a witch, and you find out she's a witch, you got two options. You can say to yourself, I bet you, she's really hot in the sack. But, but then there's that whole, cursing you and casting spells on you kind of thing. And if you think that they won't, they will. I knew this girl in college. She was from Louisiana, and I used to find weird shit inside my shoes. They're like, what? Why did you put this inside my shoe? Oh, you walk on that, it'll give you protection. I was like, oh God. So I'd hate to say that she was. I mean, I had to be honest. She wasn't the first witch that I dated. I seem to have at that time attracted a few of them, but they were all smoking hot. In my defense. But build a community of fans who care about you, not just the product you make. Learn the business, learn your business. Don't just be a songwriter. By the way, guys, go over to Scott's channel. He has been putting out some songs, man. Scott, I am impressed with your output this weekend, by the way. And I have checked out quite a few of them, and I like them all. He's got the arrangements on them, and I think you guys will like them too. The crazy hot matrix strikes again. Yeah, go over to Scott's channel, support him, and listen to his tunes he put out. By the way, I meant to mention that. You know, be your own advocate, like Scott's being, like I'm being. Support artists directly, buy their music straight from them, not just from the streaming giants. Go to shows, grab the merchandise. It makes a real difference. Stay awake. The system is never going to fix itself. As a matter of fact, it's going to get worse. When there's money on the line, the artist is the product. And you have to make that decision whether or not a lot of these people, they liked the idea at first. Prince didn't say no to Warner Brothers when they offered him a contract line. It wasn't until later that he got wiser that he realized the mistake that he had made. And I think, he didn't realize that he was because he never, and he chafed against that as much as anybody would, because he didn't see himself as being product the way that the record company did. That's why he wrote Slave on his face. But, again, you sign on that dotted line, uh, you know, there's that. Let me catch up here in the chat. Scott says, well, Mike says, I see a lot of AI content on YouTube recently. Yeah, because it's cheap to make. And it's very quick and cheap to make and very little effort. My YouTube channel is intelligence free, though. I use AI for my artwork, but that's it. Red says, my old man was hugely into the dark arts and was hell to live with. Yeah, uh, again, not going all the way down that rabbit hole, but that was a real thing that happened. That really happened. I know that book. You know, the whole law is do as thou wilt, as above, so below. I know all that stuff. But I was really in there for the chick. that's, that's They had to get you in there somehow. It wasn't the problem. It wasn't the promise of earthly riches and power. It was a chance to score with this redhead. And by the way, that should have been a hint and a half too. Crazy Hot Matrix. Yeah, I'll be heading there after this. Scott is super prolific. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I put out multiple times daily. You don't need to know about what you're doing in your off time, Scott. Here for what you're putting down, Scott. Yeah, Red. That's great, man. That's great. Redheads are trouble with a capital T. Yeah, she was. Um, yeah. In any case, amongst other things, she was a full-fledged witch. Um, but again, in the dating scene in LA, that really shouldn't surprise you guys. It's pretty common. It's more common than you think. But again, this is part and parcel of the music industry that dominates Los Angeles and the entertainment industry as well. Now we're seeing a falling away with the entertainment industry. Their power is getting less to power. Celebrities shot their shot the last few years, and people have voted and decided that they don't want to listen to them anymore. That they're finally starting to realize, hey, maybe these people are kind of nuts, and maybe they're not the sharpest knife in the rack either. So maybe we shouldn't be listening too much to what they have to say. And also, maybe we're going down a path that we may find a little bit too dark for our taste, and so let's try to turn away from this. And we see an attempt at this with, again, like I said, the desire for artists of all types, not just musicians, but painters, sculptors, everybody become their own art, their own independent person, and to build their own audience the best way that they can. But the bigger the audience, the more the bigger the audience, the more I would say that you're subject to open yourself up to some of the stuff that I said, because they will come knocking. There are some great examples we've had of guys who did well on the internet independently. The record companies came knocking and they told them to go pound sand. And I enjoyed that. I think that we've gotten to that point. One guy said, told him I don't want your RV. He says, I don't want your touring bus. I don't want, he had this whole list of things. He says, I don't want, he said, I'm good. I don't want your contracts that will leave me in the dead after working for 5 years. He went through the whole list. And that was his reply, on Twitter to the music company. And it was golden. I really enjoyed that. And so I think that we're kind of growing up. I think that we're maturing, and I think that they're losing power. Of course, there's some people who, and it's usually through poverty. They usually pick people who low education, very poor as well. Elvis being a good example of both of those, and exploited that. Best case, you become a drug addict and a political tool. Yeah, that's the best case. That's best case. I was watching the Eagles again on Don Kirshner's rock concert as well. And it was the lineup right before Bernie Layden left. and what's his name came in and took in full time, and then they got oh God, no, I'm tired, guys. But anyway, I was listening to them in that lineup, you know, and I said, boy, they sound great. They sound fantastic. It's a shame that you know the history of where it goes from this point. At that moment, that pure moment, it was about the song and the music. They were singing "Peaceful, Easy Feeling." And it was at that moment that that it was about that. And then, of course, the history has been written now of how that all went south. But certainly, best case, yeah, you become a drug addict or a political tool, like most of the members of the Eagles, in my opinion. You know, Don Henley is a huge political tool. He's a tool in general. I have heard stories of people saying he's a real dick. And if you're a real dick and you're that kind of position, that means that you're really just not a happy man. You're just not happy with yourself. It doesn't matter if you were rich or poor, famous or not, you'd still be kind of a dick. And that's not even getting into again some of the things that he did. Revocation are on a label now, but for years they did everything themselves: recording, production, marketing, even selling tickets to shows and paying the venues. Yeah, yeah. They built it up themselves. If you build it, they shall come. Now, keeping all those things in mind, let's go back to weird scenes inside the canyon. And I want to talk about a guy by the name of Douglas Murray. And on March 26th of 1938, Murray married a woman named Audrey Korthoff. And from this marriage, they would have three boys. Two of them born in curious proximity to the summer and winter solstice. I throw that in there, of course, if you're into that kind of thing. The first son was Brian Douglas Wilson, born June 20th, 1942. Second was Dennis Carl Wilson, born December 4th, 1944. And the third was Carl Dean Wilson, born December 21st, 1946. And let's talk a little bit. We started out this live stream talking about the Beach Boys, and I thought we would round this out talking about the Beach Boys and kind of understanding a little bit of their background. You know, we see all these documentaries and all these things, and rightly so, talking about the musical genius of Brian Wilson, but that usually comes from somewhere, and it comes at a price. And his father, Murray, got a job working at the Goodyear Tire Rubber Company. I remember it very well. It used to be down in Long Beach. And you would see the Goodyear blimp go by sometimes when I was a kid. Murray, the father of the Wilson boys, had an explosive temper. Dennis Wilson would say that he and his brothers had a shitty childhood. Our dad used to wail on us. That asshole, speaking of their father, beat the shit out of us. His words, not mine. The chronic abuse, he noted, led to both of his brothers being bedwetters into their teens. On many occasions, Murray's punishment went beyond simple beatings into the realm of the sadistic. It is said that Dennis, the most rebellious of the three boys, and therefore the most frequent target of Murray's wrath, was on various occasions beaten with a 2x4 and burned with matches. And one time, a particularly savage beating delivered Brian with an injury that left him nearly deaf in his right ear when he was just 2 years old. Even more disturbing, if true, was another aspect of the boys' childhoods that Dennis would later allude that he would tell people cryptic stories about being raped. Murray's younger sister, Emily, no, we won't get into that. Following his graduation from high school, Brian began taking music and psychology classes at El Camino Junior College. By the way, their house was up in Baldwin Hills. I am from that area. I'm from the Baldwin Hills, Windsor Hills area. I had no idea that the Beach Boys at one point had lived up in that area. It was a time another famous musicians that came out of my area, but before my parents. We moved there in 1969. It was at a time that the Beach Boy, conceived as a family business, came to being. Brian was joined by brother Dennis, who would evolve into the band's drummer, and brother Carl, who would become the group's lead guitarist, as well as cousin Mike Love and neighbor Al Jourdain. They all decided to get a musical direction that focused on surfing, and the band's first single, Surfing, was recorded in 1961 and released in December 8th of that same year, climbed to the charts, and they were off to the races. In this decade, by the way, between 1955 and 1965, record sales increased tenfold, from about 60 million in 1955 to 600 million by the time 1965 rolled around. So you can see that the music business was burgeoning into becoming that billion-dollar industry. Bradley said hi. Hey Bradley, how you doing? Welcome. How you doing? Good to have you here. Um, Now, I honestly read that excerpt about the Wilsons' upbringing to prove you that a lot of these artists suffered from really bad childhoods, and I see that as a common theme with a lot of these artists as well that get chosen in, because there's so many artists out there that don't have come from broken homes and don't come from underprivileged families, that have an education or have educated parents that can't be exploited, but those are the ones that don't get chosen generally, unless of course you come from the kind of families that we've been discussing here, that were present in Laurel Canyon. But that again shows you that the Laurel Canyon crew was an anomaly, and an obvious put together anomaly as well, I may add. Because in general, what I described, the poverty, poor education, things of that nature are more common than not. And abusive backgrounds, even more common. So I think that I will conclude this tonight by saying that, and by the way, thank you guys for indulging me and listening if you stayed all the way through tonight's live stream, I want to say thank you very much. I appreciate it. But just to sum this all up, again, you don't want to become product for anybody. If you have to go that product line, then be your own product that manages your own product, which is you. So, and also touching in with music and music industry and the personalities and the managers and the artists and all those people, this gumbo of the criminally insane, I guess is the best way to put it. Almost like rogues gallery, like the Riddler, the Joker, cat, Mr. Freeze. These characters are really a show, and do not be deceived by that, because I think that again, like I said, we've got to the hour now where we're beginning to see that it is, not a path that leads in, rainbows and smiles in the end. And so I always encourage this thought tonight came about because we've been discussing about, I've been recording my own music and putting it out I'm in the middle of doing that again. Scott's been putting out music. A lot of my friends are putting out music. My uncle is putting out their own music. The thing is that the music, if we take the music away from the industry falls apart. And a lot of these things that occur can no longer occur because there's no funds in order to keep them going. We have to educate ourselves and then go out from there about these things. So I talk about this tonight and hope that this leads to sparking a discussion with you and your family and your friends about these things, if it comes up naturally, of course. And probably as a way of lighting a fire, of getting people to walk away from supporting this kind of thing, supporting this industry. If we look at the history of it, we see that it's no bueno, it's no good. We see historically that there was a lot of shenanigans that this stuff is predicated on, built upon. And so therefore, if the foundation is rotten, how so more the house itself is, you know? It's just something to think about. Scott says, I've heard a connection between aerospace and Cali garage bands. Whereas the aerospace industry boomed in Cali and all the techs built homes with garages to tinker and then began the space to play. Yeah, yeah. I told you, in my neighborhood, where I learned how to play drums, piano, guitar, bass, whatever, we played in the garage. John McKnight was the guy who had all the instruments over his house. They weren't the best, but he had drum set, he had amps, he had guitars, he had keyboards, and that's where we learned how to play. And that was the culture. It was coming out of the garage. I can honestly say that I am a product of that. And yes, it had a lot to do with the aerospace industry. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, guys, I am exhausted. I had a long day on Saturday. I didn't rest, but I was up at 7:30 on Saturday. I was recording up to midnight last night, and then around 4 a.m. I woke up with the worst migraine headache because I'm subject to high and low pressures, and we have a low pressure coming in. Worst migraine. I've been up since 4 o'clock this morning, basically. And that was on top of maybe the 4 hours of sleep that I got on top of this. I've had about 4 hours of sleep in the last 48. So I'm not going to go over tonight, but I do enjoy I do enjoy taking the time to go off into these tangents like tonight. We'll get back into it. My shipment is coming tomorrow. We're going to do a preview of those guitars. I'm going to show you those guitars on the live stream. I've got some great 70s made in Japan guitars coming in tomorrow. So we'll get back to our usual stuff here. But I liked indulging this tonight, keeping the Japanese tradition of telling ghost stories and spooky, sinister tales, which is really where the idea of this came from. Actually, honestly, the genesis of it. Tonight, it's a hot night, and I thought a spooky tale of the music industry would help give you the chills and cool you down, those of you who need it, which is most of us. I want to thank all of you guys for always showing up and supporting this channel. I'm literally going to sign off now, take off my clothes, put on my PJs, brush my teeth, and go to bed. I hope you guys have a good evening, morning, or afternoon, wherever you're at, and I'll see you on Wednesday. You guys take care. Bye-bye.